Welcome back. Let's talk about Pompey the Great. More specifically, of course, Gnaeus, Pompeius, Magnus. Magnus is Pompey the Great. So Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus is one of the three triumvirs to come. Triumvir is the Latin word for three men. And he is going to be one of the participants in the first triumvirate, which I've been mentioning to build up the suspense little by little, that we'll be talking about in a future video. For right now, I want to give him some attention in the years subsequent to his consulship in 70 BC, because it's especially in the 60s BC that he really rises to prominence, even though he'd already had quite a few successes, of course, previously, notably in the takedown of the revolt of Spartacus, the slave revolt, and some other major successes. So in the 60s BC, there were two major crises that now beset the Roman Republic. One was our good pal Mithridates. He was back, even though there had been the previous campaign. Turned out he had not been completely done away with, and so he's back. The other was an incident that happened in 67 BC that in fact has enormous ramifications even within our own millennium today. You may remember in the previous video I made a rather shadowy reference at the end to 9/11. Here it is. More specifically, I'm really referring to the Patriot Act. The port of Ostia, which is at the mouth of the Tiber River, and therefore a little bit southwest of the city of Rome, was one of the major trading ports all through the Mediterranean. It had never, in fact, been completely commercialized, and never would be so until the principate of Emperor Claudius coming up during the empire. But nonetheless, it did serve as the major commercial import-export center for Rome for quite a long period of time. However, in 67 BC, there was an attack against the ships moored at Ostia by a group of pirates. Now, pirates were a constant thing in the Mediterranean. Anytime anybody ever sent cargo, freight, or anything through the Mediterranean, it was pretty much guaranteed that somewhere along the way that person would encounter pirates. Pirates could be dealt with, negotiated with, paid some amount of the proceeds from the particular cargo, but one would just know that they simply were there. Well, finally, however, the pirates went too far. They set on fire the port at Ostia, and this is in fact the closest that the Romans ever come to terrorism in the ancient world. Following year, 66 BC, we have this fellow, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus. Now, originally, when Pompey rose to prominence, he was a populist politician, even though he was from a patrician family. And he did, although he was willing to work with the Senate, he did, as much as possible, at least for this time period, side with the interest of the populace, as we saw in 70 BC when he, as consul, helped to restore power to the tribunes. Well, now the matter comes up that Pompey, who has quite a lot of sea experience, is the best placed politician and general to be able to take on the pirates. So in 66 BC, he receives the principal position, the principal position of the dictator. Once again, the Senate passes SCU. Here we have an emergency of the state. Pompey receives the special powers, and it appears the same thing happened with him as with Sulla, that he was supposed to take on these powers temporarily to deal with this crisis, and he never, in fact, let them go. Star Wars fans, of course, will remember the figure of Palpatine receiving his special powers from Jar Jar Binks and saying, "I love democracy, I don't really want to take on this power," and of course we quickly know better. So Pompey took hold of this power and was able to go around the Mediterranean and sweep away a lot of the pirates. That put him in a very high standing position with the Senate. And the Senate thereafter, when there was another invasion by Mithridates, put Pompey in charge of that campaign. And in the third of 3 wars that were carried out against Mithridates, Pompey was finally able to defeat him in 62 BC. He also, when he was in the area, also did quite a bit of work in Judea and many other eastern cities, some additional wars out there in order to bring settlements to those particular areas. Okay, so that's all great. Now, when a politician or a general receives any kind of commendation from the state of Rome for successes rendered to the Roman state of that nature, the procedure is referred to as a triumph. Now, obviously, triumph has the general sense we use today of being victorious, but triumph is also a specific ceremony that's carried out by the Roman state to honor somebody who has been successful, usually in battle. So Pompey was supposed to receive a triumph. Unfortunately, when he came back in the late 60s BC, expecting a triumph, he ran into unexpected opposition from the Optimates. The problem was that Pompey had completely reorganized a lot of the powers of the power centers out in the east, such as in the Black Sea region and also Judea and the other places, in the course of going around militarily conquering where necessary and changing things around. He had expected to receive support from the Senate. The Senate, however, refused to authorize any of these changes that Pompey made. It was this break at the moment between Pompey and the Senate that now brought Pompey over to Gaius Julius Caesar. Now, Caesar was, of course, a well-established populist. Pompey at this point still was a populist, but they were also joined by another Optimatus leader, an Optimas leader, named Licinius Crassus. These were the 3 who would have now come to form the first triumvirate. And in our next video, we're going to talk about what went on with that triumvirate and its effects further along with the politics and, of course, eventually the decline of the Roman Republic. Okay, we'll see you next video.